So I'm going to give us a brief talk about the way climate change is affecting coral reef ecosystems, because it's a model, I think, for how it's affecting many other ecosystems around the world. Many of the same themes that Monica and Camille have already talked about. I'm going to focus on the ecological perturbation of coral bleaching, shown here, which is driven by increased ocean temperatures that drive corals to lose their internal symbionts. The key feature of this is that as climate warms, as the oceans warm, that bleaching events will become more and more common. This isn't because the average temperature is going up, it's because extremes of temperature are going up. And models like this one from Van Hooijdonk et al. Suggest that bleaching temperatures in the tropics during the summer will become annual in some range between 2025 and 2075, depending upon the climate trajectory. In Palau, a country that I work near the Philippines there, annual bleaching will occur predicted by 2044 or in that range. The reason why this is the interesting kind of statistic is that it takes a while for communities to recover. So very similar to recovery of forest fires. Corals, if they die of bleaching, take on the order of about 10 years for a community to recover from a bleaching event. But even if corals don't die of the bleaching event, if they recover, new physiological and genetic evidence suggests that those individual corals are still suffering from that event over a period of 6 to 8 to 16 months. So annual bleaching events means that we will essentially get to a tipping point in coral reefs where the ability of the individual corals or the ecosystem to recover from those events is curtailed. If the events get closer and closer and closer together, at some point when the events become so frequent the ecosystem cannot recover, then you have, I think, a tipping point that pushes them into a different state. This is one general mechanism that probably applies to forests, it probably applies to grasslands and many other ecosystems. A key feature of the work that we have been doing and others in other ecosystems is that there is variability in this. In particular, not all corals bleach when others do. One coral in this picture is bleached in Hawaii, whereas conspecifics around it are not. And so the question has become, to what extent can natural selection allow ecosystems or populations to evolve within ecosystems and push them away from these tipping points? Several models, particularly of coral reefs, but other ecosystems as well, have suggested that evolution can play some role. This is one by Rachel Bay, a new faculty member at UC Davis. The blue lines there are coral populations modeled under an evolutionary model of climate change. Those two blue lines are with RCP 2.6 and 4.5, and those populations of corals persist even though the temperature is increasing. The orange and the red lines are population models at more extreme levels of emission, showing that there's a limit to the ability of evolution to do that. But we know from lots of theory that that depends on genetic variation in the population for the ability to evolve and population size. Many people around the coral world are trying to look for that variation. How common is it that there is standing genetic variation for ability to resist or tolerate heat? This is a recent map that we've been working on in the nation of Palau. The red circles there on your left are the positions of corals that can resist 35 degrees for a few hours. This is a standard test that we do with these corals. We tested 400 corals across the archipelago. On the right are the map of corals that suffer at 34 degrees. So there's a great deal of genetic variation in this population of 400 corals, all the same species, for ability to respond to heat. Whether that's true of all corals, we don't know. Whether it's generally true of ecosystems we care about under climate change is an interesting and I think important question. Corals and many ecosystems are more complicated than that because it's not just the coral that matters. In the case of corals, they have this internal symbiont that really matters to whether or not they bleach. There's different genera of these symbionts. Some are more bleaching susceptible than others. And so the dynamics of the ecology of the symbiont play a huge role in this particular ecosystem. The same might be true in terrestrial forests or tropical forests. There's also the microbiome of these systems to play a role. So all of these elements, the coral, the symbiont, the microbiome, are in flux due to climate change, and that flux may matter to the ability of these ecosystems to persist. So just to sort of sum up, evolution at heat tolerance, at least in corals, depends on a lot of factors, but it is actually something that we need to understand. Could it be that these changes in evolution push these populations away from this tipping point? Maybe not a great deal, but maybe a little bit. We turned to Nancy's point about needing more time in order to solve the climate issue. So a general question is, in what ecosystems can evolution play a major or significant role? How can we assist this process for the next couple of decades, and how long will it help? Thanks.